DeKreiger?
Here.
Wendover?
Here.
Snyder?
Here.
Brown?
Here.
King, she won't be here tonight, my understanding. Dubravik, we'll see. And Taylor?
Here.
Yeah, we have a quorum.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve the agenda for tonight?
I'll make a motion, we approve the agenda.
Support.
All in favor?
Aye.
Who did the support?
Oh, I did the main.
But who did the support?
It was a tie.
It was a tie.
We'll give it to Ed.
Give it to Ed? Okay.
You beat me to the draw.
Okay, we have no public hearings tonight, so we're just going to go ahead and get right into our new business, which is the work application submitted by Burton Hines.
Mr. Hines.
So,
great.
do you want to go ahead? Yeah, do you
Sure.
want to go ahead?
Mr. Hines is here tonight, by the way, too. So.
Yep, great.
Okay, just have a quick staff report for
Okay.
you, and you'll find all of this in your packet as we go through, but it's really for the benefit of the public, and as well as Mr. Hines, of course. And Mr. Hines gave me permission, by the way, to walk around his house and take a bunch of photos, so I didn't trespass. He knows that. So. Okay, it's a staff report for the Courthouse Hill Historic District Commission, and we're going to be dealing with a rear deck replacement of the deck and a slight enlargement of that deck. And the address of the property is 419 East Chapin Street, which is essentially in the south side of the historic district, fairly close to your property, Mark.
Yes.
Just down the street. Again, the applicant is Mr. Hines, Burton Hines Jr. Mr. Hines lives at this as residence as well, and I'm sure when I'm finished, he will have something that he might want to add. Not sure how well this is going to show up, but let me just stand up. This is an aerial, East Chapin Street, running east and west, 419. This is the lot that we're dealing with. There's an alley behind the property that is usable. We have basically the home is in this location. There is a detached garage to the rear. Rather large amount of landscaping and so forth in the rear. And again, I don't know how well you can see it on this overhead here, but this is the location of the deck. It's totally to the rear of the home. It's not to the side or in any way towards the front. This particular slide doesn't show up too well, but the rest of them I think are better. The project elements, so what are we doing or what's being proposed? There is an existing 10 by 15 feet deck that's currently located towards the rear of the house. You'll see that in a second. And Mr. Hines, what he's doing is he's rebuilding the deck. He wants to position a 4-person hot tub on the deck and just make the deck a little more usable. So he needs to be, in order to do that, he's got to upgrade it to current building code requirements, and so that's why he's in here today. We'll be extending the deck, and again, you'll see this in a second, by about 4 to 6 feet to the north towards the alley. Again, all of it will be in the rear of the home, the rear of the property. And you'll also see in a few minutes a 4-foot privacy screen that will also be extended commensurate with the deck's extension. And again, you'll see how this sets up in a minute. Be replacing the steps along the east side of the deck. And the deck itself, the deck and screen will be constructed of treated lumber and stained brown, similar to the tint of the existing deck. The finished deck height will be similar to the existing deck, which is more or less about 2 feet above ground level, so rather low profile. There are 3 standards, HDC standards, design standards that apply to porches and decks. I thought real quickly, I don't like always reading this stuff, but let me read them. They're short anyways, but the first one deals with location. The standard says that decks shall be constructed on the rear or side of the house in an unobtrusive location and be minimally visible from the street view. Decks on the front of the house are inappropriate. This is, I think, a key one because this deck will be constructed totally in the rear. The size and scale of decks shall be kept to a minimum and subordinate to the house and yard in size and scale. We'll get into that. And then style and materials, the third standard, that if they are visible from the street, so in effect this really doesn't apply because this deck's not visible from the street, but nonetheless, the style of the deck, railing, the bolsters, the spindles, shall match the architectural style and design of the house. The standards do say that decks of treated lumber are acceptable but shall be painted or stained to match or blend with the house within 1 year of installation. I'm going to run through a few slides or photos of the house. Very beautiful structure, by the way. Very beautiful home. This is a shot looking, would be north. This is from the Chapin Street, East Chapin Street. So if you were to get out of your car and be just this side of the tree lawn area, this is what you'd see. The lot rises markedly. In fact, it rises over 6 feet in a distance of about 30 feet. So there's a sharp incline. So it does really mitigate views of the rear of the home, particularly from this angle. But you can see the home. I moved just to the west a little bit to give you kind of a shot of the rear of the home, or what you can see from the sidewalk in this case. And again, basically, you can see to the far distance, you can see the garage. But essentially, the rear of the home is relatively, the rear yard is relatively shielded, due primarily to the topography, or the change in topography, but also to the proximity of the adjoining structures. Here I'm walking to the side of the house, again, the west side, and again, you can, just gives you a view of what you can and can't see if you, in this case, happen to be trespassing. If you were on the lawn in the front yard looking north, again, you can't see the deck. You see that forsythia bush. The deck would be to the east of, basically to the east of it. You see the big bay window too. That helps to block the any views of the deck as well. Here we're around into the rear yard, looking. In this case, we're looking south. This is the deck area. You can see the height of the deck, the composition of the deck, and so forth. The old deck, and you can see the screen that's been provided on the west side. That screen will be extended to mesh with the extended deck if it's approved.
So is that demolition right now? What?
Well, I started repairing it, and it wasn't built correctly. There's rotten wood, and so the more I got into it, the more I thought, I have to just rebuild this.
Okay.
According to code, it's not code either.
So that isn't new construction, that's just removing?
That's the
Yeah.
that's the
Okay.
This is a shot, again, looking at the rear. This is, I'm standing, you'll see another shot in a second. In fact, let me go to the next one. Yeah, this one's from the, I'll go back to that. This one's from the alley. If you were driving by or walking the alley, this is essentially what you'd see from the standpoint of looking at the rear facade of the home. And you can see the deck area in through here. Let me go back. Just a closer shot. Again, I was walking to the south by the garage, and again, you can basically, this is what you see. And then again, just another shot. I'm in the backyard on the other side of the garage, looking at the back of the house, and again, you can see the deck area. Just a close-up of the deck area. I think one more. This one is to the again, the west side. If you're in the rear yard looking towards Chapin Street, and the reason I wanted to show this one in particular is a rather massive amount of landscaping that's found along the deck area, just to give you an idea of what it looks like. So, okay. And I'd be happy to go back to those if need be. Staff did, in developing the report, we did provide comments with respect to each of the standards. I'd like to go over those quickly, and obviously, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask, and you may have something that you wish to expand upon, or if you may also not believe that what we've indicated here is the case. But the first one, standard, deals with location. Again, it says deck shall be constructed on the rear or side of the house in an unobtrusive location and minimally visible from the street view. Decks on the front of the house are inappropriate. Well, again, this deck will be fully positioned on the rear side of the house. As I mentioned earlier, based on the city's GIS maps, and confirmed this with the city engineer, if you're on the, if you're viewing this from, or if you're looking at this from a street view, the site is approximately 6 feet higher, the actual site of where the home is located, than the street elevation, and it rises markedly rather quickly. So that difference in elevation, coupled with the presence of the home, markedly diminishes views of the rear yard from Chapin Street. Basically, you don't have much in the way of rear yard views. Also, views of the rear yard from Chapin the views are mitigated, blocked, obstructed by the close proximity of the of the dwellings on both the east and the west as well. Along two more findings with respect to that standard. As you may recall, there's a bay window located on the west side of the home. This further reduces the extent of views into the rear yard from the street and from the sidewalk. And then as you saw with the photo, the east face of the deck screen is landscaped with vegetation of varying heights, both below and above the height screen. And again, it serves to mitigate views into the backyard. The second standard deals with the size and scale. Decks shall be kept to a minimum and subordinate to the house and yard in size and scale. There's additional information in your staff report, but I thought this was kind of interesting. The deck itself will have an overall size of approximately 190 to 210 square feet. I compared that to, again, the size, or the house and the yard in terms of size and scale. The deck will represent a little less than 3% of the overall site size, less than 7% of the rear yard area, and roughly 9% of the ground floor area of the home, just to give you an idea of the fact that it's really not a very large structure from the standpoint of its surroundings. And then lastly, the standard deals with style and materials. Standard goes on to say, if visible from the street, which this isn't, so effectively this standard, staff believes, probably doesn't apply, but the style of the deck railing, the balusters, shall match the architectural style and design of the house. Decks of treated lumber are acceptable, but shall be painted or stained to match or blend with the house within 1 year of installation. Again, the deck won't be visible, will not be visible from the street. It will be constructed of treated lumber at about one level and position with a relatively low profile, roughly 24 inches. The existing privacy screen will be extended commensurate with the deck extension, similar to what you see there now. The new deck and screen will be stained brown, a brown tint, brown hue, similar to the tint or the hue of the existing deck, and you saw those colors. And the project does not call for any modification to the exterior of the adjoining walls of the home. And lastly, in terms of your action, this is really for the benefit of the public, not just Mr. Hines, but the other public. Hi. It's the role of the commission to determine the consistency of the project with the HDC design guidelines, the one that we just went over. Findings should indicate how or why a project does or does not meet the required HDC standards for the record. And as you know, you do have the authority to table an application should additional information or time be required pursuant to rendering a determination of compliance. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. And again, Mr. Hines is here tonight in case the commission has questions of him. He did provide a site plan that's in your packet. I didn't attempt to add to that in any way, other than show you the one drawing or the one aerial as to where the deck is going to be located.
Thanks, Jerry. It's pretty complete. Does anybody have any questions?
Can we make a motion?
Yes.
I make a motion that based on the fact that this deck is in the backyard, that it is at an appropriate size and scale, that it is of an appropriate style and construction and use of materials, that we approve this addition.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes.
Enjoy your
Still talk
deck.
if you like.
Oh, no,
Hey,
Go get hammering.
It was so complete, I was just amazed how complete you were.
that was great. Yep, made it very helpful
Yeah.
for us.
And so now my next step is to get a building permit.
Your next step is,
Right.
we'll sign a little form indicating that this commission has approved it, and you'll take that over to the county building department, and they'll give you a building permit.
Okay,
Thank
very
you.
much. Thank
Good luck with your project.
Have a good evening.
Hey, you too.
Okay, the next item on our agenda, and I'm going to talk a little bit about this. Gwen Dubrovic is the one that wanted to put this on our agenda, but we'd like to go ahead and bring it up. Gwen called and asked about the possibility of discussing brick pavers for the historic district area in the streets, and in particular, she was talking about Beach Street, Mason Street, and some of those those two in particular, I don't know if she was thinking of any other ones, but she mentioned those two, where there have been asphalt patches done on the historic brick. And she was asking the question about whether we as HDC could recommend to the city to replace the asphalt patches with some existing brick that would match. I have found out that the brick that was torn up from the roads originally is right now out at Cadillac Truck Service. Apparently, they have got several piles of them out there.
Do you folks already know Marcus, the city?
Yeah, Marcus Pesha,
I pulled him in here tonight.
our city manager, yeah.
Good. Thank you, by the way, for the invitation. I appreciate it. That is certainly possible that there are bricks at Cadillac Truck. I do know that there are at least 2 piles of what I'm calling reclaimed bricks at the city's Public Works facility. I believe it was 2 years ago, a street project, the River Street project, being done. There were some bricks that were discovered. Whether or not they match what's in the historic district, I do not know, but I requested and essentially required that instead of the bricks just going to be, tossed, that we reclaim as many as we can
Right.
basically take. And they are literally in piles. They haven't been studied, nor have they been cleaned and had excess mortar and so forth removed from them. I don't really know how many are in a condition that could be reused, but I would like to think that certainly there would be some. But we'll look at the Cadillac truck. That's new information, at least for me.
Okay, yeah, what I found out about Cadillac Truck Service, and this is per the owner, Richard Boscher, that there is basically 2 sets they have. They have what they call a restoration quality brick, which is good on all 4 sides, but there's not a lot of those. And then they have the landscape quality, which means 1 to 2 sides are good. Those are already sorted, and he said there are 4 pallets of those that exist.
Combined?
No, just for the landscape.
Oh.
So, and they're at their site where they had the fire on 13th Street. They're still there. I didn't go see them because I didn't want to walk around out there and try to guess, but their offices are now over in the industrial park. But anyway, they're more than willing to talk to us about that. They said they can either sell by the piece, they can sell by quantity and give us a discount. So I think it's a good question. Now, whether these were pulled out of the city streets, but I don't know if this was River Street or where they came from. I think it might have been,
Cass Street had a bunch that people were
Yeah, I think it
going
might have been
after
Cass.
too, when they dug up and resurfaced Cass Street, I know, but
and whether they would match or not, I don't know either, but it certainly would look better than the asphalt patching. I guess my question is, what can we do as the HDC to make a recommendation to the city to do this work? Can we propose, recommend, suggest?
Kind of shooting from the hip, members of the commission, I would suggest that certainly by motion, a recommendation to look at using some of the reclaimed brick with respect to using it for patching and/or replacement in the future would be certainly helpful. Would give me a little more teeth, if you will, when working with through the process of trying to figure out how to use the brick. It really, I guess, the use of it could perhaps depend on the quality of the materials. If they don't match, how far off are they? Obviously, there's some added labor and costs in using that material versus simple asphalt patching. When the time comes where we're looking at replacing the street, I would love to be able to put brick back in the historic area. That's just my own personal feeling on the matter. Whether or not the city can afford to do that could be, a whole different equation. But I'm certainly supportive of the concept and certainly appreciative of your sentiments on the issue.
So we could do this for future patching. What about going back and redoing what the asphalt patches that are there now with the reclaimed brick?
Well, I certainly can't sit here and say that that's not possible. It really just gets down to cost.
Yeah.
And I really don't know what those costs might be. Even looking at and using them in the future, I don't know the differential of what the cost is or the time of putting it together. But it's something that we can certainly look at when trying to develop a budget down the road for future patchwork. I think part of the issue is the need to be able to respond. I guess, forgive the expression, but in this instance, but somewhat swiftly. I know that when you talk about government and speed, the two are sort of oxymorons. But with respect to roadway repairs and issues, especially once we're aware of one, there's that liability that's there, and the crews are out there with the machinery and the equipment and the raw material essentially to do cold patching and hot patching pending the season, and it's a quick fix to ensure that a car is not going to blow out its tire or cause damage or injury. And so there's that sort of balance. It would perhaps be the same group of people that would be laying the brick or installing the brick instead, and that could create some logistical issues. It's something that we'll definitely need to evaluate how to do it, what the cost of doing it is. Is there, and I'm just talking out loud as I'm thinking, is there a contractor that could be secured, to do that kind of specialized work? And in the interim, do we just put, barricades out if there's a situation, to just caution people to be careful? So there's probably a variety of answers to your question, and I'm sorry if I'm not nailing down just a simple solution to it, but just a lot of pieces that we'd have to think about.
I think it's within our realm to make a recommendation. So I think we'd like to do that. I don't know how everybody else feels about this, but would ultimately the city council have to vote on something like this as far as the expense goes? There's Gwen.
It depends.
Okay.
It really depends.
Okay.
We would need to do some preliminary work first, frankly, just understanding what the materials are that we have available to ourselves already, what the materials might be available, what the costs of the materials are that perhaps Cadillac truck has. I would need to get an understanding for what the time would be involved, the labor involved in laying it down, and then, as we start to sort of frame what might be what I call a primary project versus just the simple patchwork stuff, if you will, then certainly this could be a part of our CIP program, which does get council approval. The current CIP program has already been approved by council, but there's always the ability of looking at adding it in the future.
Okay. Gwen, we've just been talking about the brick paver program that you had recommended and got a little bit of information from Cadillac Truck Service regarding the types of bricks they have and how they'd be willing to sell them and where they're located. And Marcus said, where was the other location that you were aware of, other reclaimed brick?
I believe it's off of 6th Street. Is it 6th or 7th?
Yeah, the city garage.
Yeah,
City Garage.
The city's public works facility off of 6th Street. It's in the secured area. There are various I'll call them deposits of different spoils, different materials, including, I believe, at least 2 piles of reclaimed brick in various states of repair or disrepair.
So Marcus has told us that it's within our realm to make a recommendation to the city that any future repairs be done with evaluating the opportunities with these reclaimed brick and see if we can't find something that would match closely, as long as we can find a contractor and that type of thing, but that we could make the recommendation. I also asked if there was any way to go back and redo what's the asphalt patches that have already been done. And
And that's, again, that's possible too. It really depends on what the total scope of the project becomes and what the costs are and how that fits within, essentially the repair budget of the Public Works Department.
So maybe we could put together a motion or a recommendation twofold then, and ask the question, can we do the repairs on the existing asphalt patches? Find the necessary bricks that would work, the equivalent, and then the contractors that could do the work and evaluate the cost, et cetera. And then all future patching, same thing, to be done with reclaimed brick.
In the
We can make that recommendation.
area.
Yeah, we're talking about the historic district area right now.
I just wanted to mention, we did that circular drive, which is kind of long, with brick and pavers, and it was Shepherd's from McBain. And I think the sons may have broken off from their father, but it was that group who did ours. And we plowed with a pretty heavy-duty truck goes there, all winter. And just so you know, I think they have at least some experience in doing that, so it's just something.
As a contractor.
Yeah.
It would be nice to keep it local, you know?
Yeah.
Does anybody have anything else on that subject?
That's a good point, as far as a group that's already worked with doing that with the streets. Another thought, I have no idea if there are any programs, I know there are some, like the CTC or Baker College or things like that, where if there are people that are interning or kids for service credits or anything like that, as long as they had oversight, to even find a way to have some young folks that wanted to do something or needed service hours or, something.
As far as
like that.
gathering the bricks?
Yeah, either gathering the bricks, because that's totally unskilled. You just have to make sure they look decent enough, But even, I was just, driving by, seeing the current little patches that have been done, And, what is it, Mason Street, the east end of I'm not totally sure if I'm oriented exactly right on the map, but sort of northeast-ish end there of Mason Street. Just as there had been cement patches in the past down the middle of the street for whatever work was done on that northeast end, there's also a big square section where most of that intersection there is already cement before it gets to the new asphalt street, but there's a section right at the end that's level with the cement, so it's not stuff that's like wearing away and you're getting to bricks underneath. They're already a section of bricks that, a cement patch there, the whole rest of it's already cement slab. But those bricks in that little patch are in pretty good shape. It's a matter of lifting them and using them. And I was looking, I'm like, that'd probably be 3, maybe 4 of those holes, that are there in the street if we were looking at just hole patching at the time. But I don't know, it could be a great project for, folks that are learning a new trade, learning a new skill, and could help with the cost issues of the labor issues, because that's, doing a street like that's a lot of labor more than material, at least because our bricks are local, and retail sale for salvaged bricks are like, it's gone down to $1.50, $2.50, like $3 is probably the top brick now, but as much as 7-8 years ago, they were $3 to $5 a brick to buy salvaged bricks that were being old 100-plus-year-old bricks put down in, to pave, do tons and tons of paving on municipal properties, university properties, that kind of thing across the country. So the fact that they are our own bricks from Cadillac, the city's bricks already, that we have some,
Right.
and a bunch of them are thrashed, but a bunch of them are in good shape. So it's just really the fact that we could get them for, at least before they had spoken to me, around that range of like 50 cents a brick sort of a thing, if we provided our own labor to gather them. So
Does anybody have anything else they want to ask, or any other suggestions of what else we can? Okay. How do we go about doing this recommendation then? Can you take what we have here? Do we need to make a motion to submit a recommendation?
I would suggest a simple motion. It just makes it a little more official.
Okay.
I'll certainly work with Bruce DeWitt, the city's engineer and public works director, who ultimately is going to need to be involved in doing the estimates as well as the planning for how the bricks will be used.
Okay.
To get them involved in the project. We only have one Bruce, and so it will take a little time in putting something together. And certainly I'll be communicating with Jerry, and Jerry can also communicate back with the commission as time goes on to give everybody a status update as to where things are at and how we'll look at
Okay.
moving it forward.
So basically, our recommendation would be for any future patches that are being done to utilize the reclaimed brick that we know exists at 2 different locations. There's local bricks, and also possibility of exploring the opportunity to go back and repair the existing asphalt patches. So would somebody like to make the motion for that recommendation?
Sure. I'll make a motion that we explore possibilities for patching asphalt patches down Mason and Shelby. That's Shelby there, I believe.
Or we could just say the historic
The
district,
historic
since
district.
that's our venue.
Streets.
Yeah.
This calendar year, and then perhaps relaying of those entire areas in subsequent years.
Is there a second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Thank you. Thanks.
Madam Chair, I need to excuse myself. There's been somewhat of a family tragedy back in the Chicago area, the loss of an aunt, and so I'm gonna gather my family and.
Sorry to hear that.
Okay, Marcus?
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'll chat with him. Yeah, okay.
Question?
Okay.
Was that approved, the
Yes.
fence?
Yes.
Deck?
Quickly.
We'll cover it with you. Yeah.
We can do the approval of the minutes, though.
No, we
Which is
jumped
way
over
up there.
that.
We did?
Yeah, we just did the
We
approval.
approved the agenda.
Okay,
We
let's,
did not approve the minutes.
oh, I apologize for that. Okay, let's go ahead and do that right now. It looks like I missed that on our agenda. So do we have an approval of the April 8th meeting minutes? Everybody had a chance to review those, I assume.
I make a motion, we approve the minutes.
A second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
I'll abstain from that because I wasn't.
You weren't here. Okay. One abstention. Okay, we're going to move on to old business here and discuss the Cobbs and Mitchell building. We've had several discussions about this so far. One thing I would like to say just in the outset is, right now, I do not have a conflict of interest with this issue as I have in the past because of my family is no longer involved with the real estate of that building. So I feel confident that I can go ahead and take part in that discussion. I also would just like to point out some of the summaries that we have and some of the information and what was on your table here in front of you when you came in to make sure everybody's got the same amount of information. First off, this had been mailed to you earlier. This was a summary regarding the Cobbs and Mitchell project, when it was listed for sale, when it was listed for lease. It also includes a very brief summary of the rehabilitation and restoration budget. This is not detailed, and there were probably some revisions since then, but it has, the majority of the information is correct on that. Also includes all of the tax credits and incentives, the dollars, amounts, what they are, and the expiration dates. And you all have had this for a couple weeks. This has also been sent to Al Meshkin. I asked him to let me know if there were any corrections or changes. I have not heard back from him. So at this point, we are to assume that this is correct. So this is just background information, so you know what's going on with that project and what's been going on with it. In addition to that, on your table tonight, we had a copy of the Cool Cities grant that had been given to the owners of Cobbs and Mitchell. And Jerry, do you want to talk about that?
Just real briefly, I just got this, by the way. I think Owen Roberts, the financial officer for the city, did talk with Ed briefly about trying to break down or indicate, how the $100,000 Cool Cities grant was spent. And so Owen quickly put this together. It does equal $100,000, but again, I've not had a chance to review this, but it provides, again, a breakdown of different elements associated with that project and how those dollars were spent. And for various work activities associated with the project.
Right, because that did come up when Mr. Meshkin was here at the last meeting. He did briefly state that it was spent on a variety of projects, including masonry project, some painting, some lighting fixtures, etc.
And it assures me it adds up to 100,000, by the way, so.
He did not have an accounting of that at
No.
the time, and I thought it would be useful that we have that, but it also begs a follow-up question. If indeed the Cool Cities grant administered by the city paid for, it looks like a couple of certain studies, are those now public documents? Drawings,
Right.
et cetera?
I don't know, Ed, I can find out, though. I'll surely find out.
I
One would assume they are.
I would assume they
Yes,
are.
and I
My
would too.
understanding
Right.
is that they would be.
Right, and I will, I'll find out.
Okay.
I'll let all of you know.
It looks like a lot of those were paid for to put together the tax credit projects, I mean, the details for the tax credits, to attain those, the application, the cost that was involved in that.
In your report, was great in adding all those summaries, and you in fact included that part 2 from SHPO in yours, which you got from the state, right?
This actually, yeah, but this is actually not the part 2. It's not that detailed. This was a preliminary budget that was done. I don't have all the detail, so we would have to get that from Al Meshkin.
SHPO Friday too.
Oh, really?
Which I did.
Well, I don't know if they can provide it. I don't know what the regulations are there. I think Al Meshkin should be able to provide it if these tax credits, and we know that they are all transferable, certainly a potential property owner would need to see that. So we should be able to get them from him. Have we got copies of those?
Pardon?
Have we ever gotten copies of those, of the part 2?
And I've not, personally, I haven't been involved in this project, but I'll find out.
I think we could get them from him. I mean, like I said, if we transferred them to a new property owner.
I met with Mr. Meshkin this last Friday, and I'm assuming he will, if there's anything that we need relative to this, for example, I see no reason why he wouldn't provide it to us, so I'd be happy to find out.
Yeah, I think we need to get the part 2, because that's going to say exactly what the project's going to entail and what the costs are.
What we're trying to do is actually I'm putting it together, like a folder, you might say, that kind of summarizes all of this information in a nice succinct format. So whether it's Mr. Meshkin or anybody else, it's right there. They'll see what's been done, what's being done, and what needs to be done, so that's my goal.
So can you tell us about the discussion that you had with Mr. Meshkin?
Basically, it
on
was
Friday?
just a continuation of the discussion you had. I was just offering any assistance that we might be able to provide as a city from the standpoint of particularly helping market the building, be it, use of one of our social sites such as Facebook and so forth. If he's got any literature, make that available to us. He did indicate he's putting together some literature on the building. Said he would provide that to us from a marketing standpoint. That was the primary focus of our discussion is, what can we do to help you get something moving? Now, obviously, you'd love to have a tenant. It's a little more difficult than it may sound, but that was really the gist of the discussion was what can we do to help you get this project moving along?
Could the city send out RFPs for him to potential developers to partner with
Kind of a
him?
tricky issue now
Or
because it's
for
privately
tenants.
owned, the building.
Right.
It doesn't mean we can't do certain things. You take, for example, the DDA district, the Downtown Development Authority District. We put on our website, as we get the information, of the availability of like commercial buildings in our downtown. those are, in the most cases, privately owned buildings. So we're able to do some things, but we do have to be somewhat careful in that, in terms of what are we doing, how much are we spending, and who are we benefiting? If we can demonstrate there's a public benefit, then it becomes a little easier. But I can ask the city attorney to what our limits are, so to speak.
This is in the DDA, right? Mm-hmm. This building, Cobb's and Mitchell.
I don't,
I thought it was.
good question. I can
These
find out real
notes I'm
quick.
gonna
See, that
post
we're
that
getting
I thought it was, because I thought at the last meeting it was.
I think this building is,
Pardon?
but I think it ends at this building, as I recall. I believe, I can find out quickly. I've got it on my GIS map. I can tell you in 2 minutes or
That'd
less.
be good to just verify.
Yeah,
This
'cause
was in
I-
these minutes, but I don't know if that was someone's
Do
recollection.
you mind if I go look real quickly?
I think it would be really helpful to know that.
Yeah, don't take me a second.
While he's doing that, Madam Chair, we had the discussion last time about the history, whether or not the city was interested. I'm sorry that the city manager had to leave, but it would be interesting to note if indeed there is a possibility that the building goes on the tax rolls. What is the procedure, priority-wise, of who can step up if it goes onto the tax rolls? Usually, I believe.
It is on the tax roll.
Yeah, what do you mean
No, I
by
mean, if it,
a tax sale?
a tax sale.
Okay,
If the taxes are not paid,
okay.
does the city get priority to step in? I believe they do.
I think we decided on that, and we can verify that with Jerry, that it goes to the county first.
Are they delinquent on their taxes?
Well,
According to public information that we received before the last meeting, they are delinquent on their taxes. And that doesn't necessarily mean anything.
Right.
In their defense.
he did print off a couple of copies here of this. Look at that.
But it does raise the question of, if it went up for taxes, would
It is in the DDA.
Yeah, this is the end property.
Right at the end. That's what I
The law
thought.
office to the north, or it would be to the east, is not in the district. The monument company, just to the south, that's not in the district, nor is the church, First Baptist. So
Okay.
this property, the building and the parking associated with the building, they're in the DDA district.
Okay, all right.
good.
So Ed's question is, if for some reason this Cobb's and Mitchell building, they didn't, went into tax receivership, right? What would be the procedure? Because at the last meeting, we were told that it would go to the county first.
It would go to if it went into a tax foreclosure.
Correct.
Okay, the first right of refusal, so to speak, is the county. And typically what happens is the county, if it's in the city, the county will contact us and say, "City, would you like it?" We have a choice to say yes or no. We just went through this with another piece of property, by the way. If we said no, then it rests with the county. The county then has the opportunity to basically sell it via the bid process. If it goes to the city, then essentially we obtain it. Hi, Art. It becomes ours. We will have some costs associated with that, such as payment of back taxes and so forth, but it becomes ours.
So typically, the arrangement is that the city would have the first right of refusal.
The county, right, the county automatically gets it.
First.
And then historically, play on words here, if it's in the city, they will contact us and say, do you want this property? At least that's what they've always done in the past. So yes, we would have the first right of refusal.
So just to reiterate on the taxes, let's go ahead and clarify that, because this was provided to us the day of our last meeting on April 8th. Brian put this together for us, and it talks about the tax summaries for calendar year 2012 and 2011. So, has there been any changes since this report was given to us on April
In
8th?
terms of payment of taxes?
Correct.
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay.
Summer tax.
Is the building still for sale?
Yes.
Okay, because you mentioned your family's no longer involved.
But as I understand
He's-
it, there's not a listing agent right now.
Yeah,
It is for sale.
Do we know
Correct.
how much he's asking?
I don't know, I can find out for you.
I would appreciate it.
I
we
asked
asked
him, and he did not, he said, I don't know.
I didn't ask that question of him, so, but I'll ask him.
Jill asked him at the
I-
meeting.
I think it's an important piece of information. How much is the building listed for?
I'd be happy to ask him.
What it used to be listed for?
What it is currently listed for now?
Okay. Do you want to know what it was listed for?
So that's
We had
in-
that information, and that's in the
Yeah,
report.
I want to know what he's asking for it now.
Okay, now.
What about, he's also looking for tenants, so it's either an and/or, correct? I mean, he'll either sell it or looking for tenants?
My understanding, based on my discussion with him on Friday, was he would prefer to retain ownership of the building and would like to obtain tenants, rent it, lease it, so that he can get the financing needed to make the improvements that are needed to accommodate those tenants. That's his first, according to him, that's his first choice. But, if that's not going to work out and he can sell it, then he'll sell it.
Did he indicate to you that he was going to try to do any of the improvements such as elevator, bathrooms on the first floor, handicap ramp, all the things that he knows has to be done in order to lease it?
Didn't indicate to me that he was going to be doing anything.
Okay, so nothing has changed on that? Okay. The other questions, I wanted to bring up some other questions that were brought up at the last meeting, and just kind of wondering, one of the things that came up was the elevator grant that the city has, whether or not the city can do that with these other incentives that are already in place.
Sure they can.
Are you sure it doesn't conflict with the Oprah grant at all?
No, not to my knowledge. We can, it's a whole different pot of money, so to speak.
Okay.
And essentially, it's not really a grant. It's a loan,
Deferment of
low-interest
taxes.
loan.
The elevator?
Paid back through tax increment financing. Essentially, we would capture a portion of the taxes that are generated by the improved property, and that goes to pay back the elevator grant. We call it a grant, it's not really a grant.
Okay, the only way it would not be beneficial to an owner is if the owner was a nonprofit.
If they don't pay property taxes.
They'd have to pay
that's
property
correct.
taxes.
Right.
There's also, in terms of the formula used to determine whether or not the money is going to be allocated, there's a somewhat complicated formula, but it involves the amount of job creation, the amount of investment, and in any case, can the dollars be recouped in a timely fashion via tax increment financing?
But as a developer, you have to come up with the money and pay for the elevator first, and then it is deducted from your taxes in multiple years, correct?
Yes, we can work
Credited
with
to your
them
taxes.
to some degree, because typically what happens
What
with,
does
like,
that
take
mean?
the elevator grant program or the facade improvement program, we typically work with local banks to administer that program, so we have some latitude to deviate from the norm, so to speak, a bit, but not a lot. The big thing is, they're going to have a certain amount of money themselves.
Right.
They're going to have some guarantee of a payback within a reasonable period of time via tax capture, so.
But that is contrary to what we had heard, that the elevator grant and the Oprah grant were mutually exclusive.
They
Yeah.
are from the standpoint that if you were to do the Oprah, your taxes are abated for a period of time,
So you're not,
and so we're not able to recover then,
so it doesn't apply.
through tax increment financing, the tax dollars.
I understand.
Okay.
Another thing that came up at the last meeting is that it was suggested that maybe he could partner with another developer, another owner/developer that could either invest money or help to find tenants or in some kind of a partnership capacity, work with him. And he was looking for a list of developers. And I think you might remember that I mentioned that I could send one that we had available through the Michigan Historic Preservation Network, pretty lengthy list. And I did send that to him and sent a copy to the city. So he did receive it, said he got it. So he was going to contact some of the developers on there to see if he could try to get a partner that could help him. Hopefully with the infusion of money, because the money is the issue, the working capital is the issue and has been from the beginning, because the state tax credits, federal tax credits, all of those apply the same way. You still have to have the money up front to do the work. You don't get those until the end. So it goes back to being able to get the working capital to make these projects happen. So.
I have a question. On the Cool Cities grants, when those came through, my impression that they were really for infrastructure of your town or city versus a building, which if that building is a central thing that's serving the community, that makes sense. If it's a viable building, that makes sense, even if it's now the fact that through this, he can get the thing put back on the tax rolls, which helps the city, and you have business people using it and tenants and all that. So I could see how it could go that way, and maybe I just had a misperception of how Cool Cities grants
This is
were
not a
applied.
typical Cool Cities grant. This was not a typical Cool Cities grant. When this happened, it was done to make this building, to provide an incentive for this building to a new potential owner so that they could get started with the project. It was not intended, this was just a pool of money that had been in the Cool Cities budget for the state, and I think the reason they were able to attain this had something to do with the fact that it had been previously owned by MDOT. The building had been, correct. So there was a correlation there somehow, but this is not a typical Cool Cities grant.
Yeah, I'm like,
at the time. No, right.
And I'm like, some of these things were done prior to Michigan taking control of the building too, so technically it's still in public hands, so it's like, but not all. So I was like, how'd that happen? How does this work?
But one
So
thing
that's-
too, that, and maybe you're aware of this already, the city initially, when this whole process started, was led to believe by one of the state agencies that they would also be given somewhere in the neighborhood of $500,000 to $750,000. As it turned out, things went south, so to speak, with the economy, and they told us, no, we're not going to give you the money. And I think part of the reason the $100,000 through Cool Cities came about was due to the fact that, to save face, those dollars were generated. But there was a sizable chunk of money that had been, unfortunately, verbally promised to the city by a significant department head for the state of Michigan, and it just didn't come about. And things like that happen, I realize. But nothing in writing, nothing that, says, okay, city, you are going to be getting $500,000, $750,000 to go towards helping renovate this building. That never came about.
Jerry, I'd like to bring up one more thing that came up at the last month's meeting. Was somebody asked, could we do the same thing, could the city do the same thing to help this building owner and this building like they did the H.L. Green building? So can you explain, and I don't know what else to call it that, but that's what we always call it, the old H.L. Green building that was transformed into what's now R.J. Grant's and that block. Can you explain what the city did at that time?
That project was largely financed by the Cadillac Downtown Fund, okay, which is kind of a quasi city commission, so to speak, although really it's a private group of individuals. In fact, they'll be meeting this Wednesday. And through various sources, they had a pot of money, so to speak, and the downtown fund, which essentially they operate through the chamber. They purchased the building, rehabbed it into the 3 stores, did basically a white box development, then sold the spaces, and then have utilized since then those dollars, or some of those dollars, to do additional projects as well. So, I mean, it is possible for an organization, even the DDA, for example, has the authority under the law to buy a building like that, to buy, let's say, the Cobbs and Mitchell building, and to turn around and resell it, or to develop it, so to speak, but it takes dollars to do that. It's not something, too, that the DDA has even really been approached about, so I have no idea what their interest would or would not be. When this building was marketed, too, originally, before Mr. Meskin purchased it, it was, as I recall, and again, I wasn't in charge of this, but the city did a rather extensive, fairly comprehensive job of notifying folks throughout the state of its availability and so forth, and there weren't basically any takers.
There's only one other application, because I was on that task force, yeah. One other application besides Mr. Meshkin.
And, it was a toughie. And he came, we did our due diligence, came highly recommended by State Historic Preservation Office, had excellent financial credentials. We did a lot of checking, I know. And I think he had every intent of doing what he would like to do. It's just, unfortunately, wasn't able to get financing because of his inability to find tenants. And I don't want to speak for him, but those are my understandings.
Well, we tried to get ideas from him at the last meeting, unsuccessfully to some part. And there are certainly some things, for example, if we had talked about the handicapped access to the lower level, which might not be that large a financial item, but actually could begin by coming here and applying for permission to get started on that, which would cost nothing, and didn't seem to get any interest.
It's really up to him. It's a...
Right. I mean, I think we tried to give him some idea that we were willing to help, and what can we do to kind of get this thing off the dime. I don't really know there's a lot more we can do at this point than to keep nudging them.
Yeah, it's privately held. I don't really know what we can do.
Right.
Well, I guess that's a little bit of a question I have. If we were to, even if it's tax abatement and he has to come up with it, and, if he managed to do that at the same time, or deferment reduction, still it's a nice way through that elevator grant to get something going at the same time. If all the tax incentives haven't done it, if there are people looking for tenants in town, yada, yada, I don't know how much more other than a nudge, what can you do for this guy? And if it's a matter of, if the nudge is us providing more money from the city, essentially, for really a private project, even though it would be nice to have a viable building up and going, what is, I guess I'm just playing devil's advocate, what's the better option? Let him, and I don't know why, because the taxes aren't that much money, but if he can't come up with, like in the neighborhood of 10 grand on the taxes, and we're looking at how many hundreds of thousands of dollars that, if that little amount of cash, it's like, well, it would be a difficult thing to say, hand more money to, like the Quill City stuff. This was to help make it all viable, and that was $100,000. So if he's essentially already been handed that and it still can't, and I know in this, the notes or whatever from last meeting that he had said, he's hoping that the economy will turn around and that kind of thing, and it is privately held, but, if he is in arrears, and if that was just allowed to take the natural course, and then what did you say, right of first refusal is the county, and then it could maybe go to the city, whatever. If it came down to that, and that really was that much of an issue that he could lose the building because of that, maybe that's a better way to go at it, and then possibly look at reuse in some other way of the building, if it's, more community citizens. And it might have been an asking price situation, and again, it'd be nice to know what he's asking for now.
Well,
If the owner doesn't know what he's asking,
it's kind of tough.
I have to excuse myself, I have another commitment, I'm
Okay.
sorry, I apologize.
Hi, thanks for being here. I guess the only other thing I want to add to the selling price, you can always entertain offers. Offers are made every day on properties, and rarely do they get their full listed price, especially in this market. So, I wouldn't dwell on that a whole lot.
He's not getting offers, so.
Correct.
That's the
Right, yeah, I
point.
don't
Correct.
think he
Is-
is.
Again, it comes back to, from the developer side, I realize that we've talked about there are some things they could do, but there's a lot of money that's gonna have to go into that building to get it up to code. And the right use, and it will, that will be a viable percentage of the total project, it'll make sense. Hasn't found the right use yet. I don't know what it is. It's got.
I know what it should be. It should be city council building, the city hall.
City offices.
Yes, Art and Jerry. Then this thing could be raised and it could be developed as lakefront property, a lot of money on the tax rolls. See there? And then everybody wins.
That's been suggested, by the way.
Yeah.
It has.
Yeah.
So just a thought. That's why I mean, like, if it reverts, do we really want to help out when it's, and I'm not saying we don't want to be helpful, but, as far as him personally, something that in theory helps him personally, and you would hope by any successful businessman in town is going to be a help to the whole community. But, at the same time, perhaps other means of supporting or providing for the community, to let it go that way.
It seems that some of the areas that the city could help on, and Jerry, you basically already said this, would be to, first of all, help market it and see what can be done about continuing to market it. You're
My
putting together.
understanding that he may, based on what he told me, he may look for a real estate firm that has somewhat of a national presence. I think that would be helpful.
A specialty in historic
Especially in
buildings.
historic,
Yeah.
and so
Reuse.
we'll see if he does that or not, but that was a good sign.
Yes.
And we'll see what happens. We will be sending him a letter, just as a point of information, thanking him for meeting with us and offering to assist.
Great.
Da-da-da-da.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah.
And
Make
you're
sure you get a copy of that.
And then you said you're also putting together the packet summary of
Yeah,
this
we're
information that
putting
we talked-
together, as we
Okay.
get pieces of information, we're putting it together so that there is one place where all this hopefully can be found.
My only other suggestion would be to get if he's willing to give it to us, or maybe not necessarily us, but the city, would be the part 2 of the tax credit project, the tax credit application, both state and federal should be the same, because that will identify the details of the rehabilitation project and the costs for each.
I'll ask him along.
Because if you do find a potential buyer, that would be something that the new buyer would have to follow in order to get the tax credits. They'd have to follow it the way it's been proposed. So it seems like that would be a natural piece.
But if indeed the Cool City grant paid for that anyway, which is what this appears to be, it seems to me that that is public record.
It could be, I just don't know.
We may have it here.
Yeah, I just don't know, but I think
We'll find out.
it's an important piece.
We'll dig.
Does anybody have any other comments on this issue?
Jerry, is there any other discussion on any public parking on that sector of town on the east side of Mitchell Street at all? Because obviously that's a big shortcome on that property also.
Yeah, nothing associated with, near or around that particular building, no.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a good point.
If we get a nice grant for a parking structure on the south side of that lot, that'd really be a viable property.
It's it has some challenges with respect to parking.
Yeah, it's, yeah.
The one thing it has going for it right now, and again, I don't believe there's a formal agreement, but, the First Baptist Church, they use his parking, and I know they'd be willing to work out some type of
Right,
agreement,
right.
that, okay, hey, we use yours, you will accept your overflow as well.
And that's, I would assume that's true depending on who the tenant is.
Right. And so, that could change in the future, right?
Those of you who have been to Plymouth, Michigan, they put the parking deck in the Fleet Street lot behind that, and in doing it, added the elevator to the thing, which then, through ramps, made the second story to buildings handicapped accessible. So that the parking deck provided the elevator and the handicapped access to free up essentially 3 blocks of second stories.
Well, we've looked at that from the standpoint, take the downtown, buildings that are 2 and 3 stories, but lack an elevator. The thought is, why not put an elevator at one end of the block, so to speak?
Right.
But,
If you can get the building owners to create a common corridor.
right,
So, we've looked at that too from the standpoint of even water service for fire suppression. If you can put it underground, why can't you put it above ground, as part of a project? So we do think about these things once in a while, so.
Thank you for meeting with Al, going down there on, to Helena. That was really helpful. And it seems like we're trying to do what we can to make the issue, raise awareness. Thanks, Ed, for bringing this up. Keep plugging away at it.
And he did say he was gonna put back that big, beautiful block. It's all,
Right,
that limestone out there.
I think so.
It's tipped over by.
Yeah, he did say he was gonna do that,
Yeah,
yeah.
you're right, too. The second one's out now, too.
Okay.
Sooner than later.
Well, sure. Would you like to, I'm sure she'll take it right now.
Do we do public comments, or is that what? Do we jump down to that right now, or do we, I'd like to,
You can if you wish.
yeah, if you have a comment or a question or whatever regarding this issue, do you want to?
Actually, it was on another item. I didn't grab an agenda. I was just asking if you have public comment at the end. Or
We do.
Okay, I'll wait.
Okay.
Thank you.
I want to touch base on our next old business item, the Historic District Ordinance Review. Jerry, did you confirm the attorney will be here in June?
Yeah, he has a list of the questions that you raised. I got it through Brian. And he's scheduled to be here at your next meeting.
Okay.
So you can ask him anything you want to ask him regarding the HDC.
Well, I have a comment about that. I have gone through the proposed changes that Brian put together for us based on, which looks like this. You all had this, the draft?
Yeah, I have everything.
Yep. And then it's based on this was the original one that he gave us in January. This is where all our questions came from, and then there are a couple things missing between this and this.
You want to
So
send it to me? Just,
I can do that. I can send it to all of them. It just, I noticed two things, but I think it might be helpful if everybody would go through these two pieces and make sure that another set of eyes here that we didn't miss anything, because it's a lot of information.
Great.
So,
But he's all set, so.
okay, great. So I will send you my questions, and should I copy everybody on that?
Go ahead.
Okay. All right, we'll do that.
It's just information at this.
Correct. We're just trying to get to the bottom of what's being proposed. Okay. So if anybody has anything else, then they can also do the same. Okay, anything else on that? We have no tabled items, and we have no informational items. Are there any other commissioner comments? Public comments. We have public.
You guys aren't used to that, are you? No. Especially this part, too. It's actually to give a thank you to you, but First of all, 2 items. The first one is to thank you. On April 25th, we had a luncheon for all the volunteer committees. I know that one of your members, Mr. Wendover, attended. I think he was the only one from your committee, so I wanted to make a personal stop here. I got the opportunity to be the speaker this year and thank everybody, but we definitely want to thank all of you for the volunteerism that you give to our community. And really our message this year was how Cadillac is a team, and the hidden group is the volunteer committees like yourself, that if it wasn't for all the different committees that we have in this community, we would be in trouble. In the volunteering, the time that you put in to make our community what it is important. We actually kind of paraphrased there how the volunteers, a lot of times you're like that, the offensive lineman of a team. When the team's going well and they're scoring touchdowns, it's usually not the offensive line that's on the television getting the credit, but as soon as they have a holding penalty or an offsides, they seem to have their faces on. And I know sometimes as a volunteers, it can feel that way, that all the hidden things going on doesn't get a lot of the recognition. But if something's going wrong and it's noted, that's when you seem to get the people talking to you. So just to know on behalf of the city and the community that we want to say thank you for what you do. This is an important part of it. This historic district is a big part of it. And we also talked a little bit at that about how the thank you comes from people that don't even know what you're doing. So it's the people that are going to be growing up, or the ones that buy a home in the historic district, and the things that you've done to help the area. So that was the first one. Secondly, more specific on the historic district, I want to thank you for your efforts there too. This is a special tie for me because I was on that historic district study committee when it came. And I remember the couple years before, how there was a lot of push to not have it. Of all the reasons it was going to not work, and all the reasons why it wouldn't help the community. And a lot of credit to Wendy Moore that really pushed this as well. But it came here, and it's been something that's just been awesome for the community. So I always have a special tie with the fact that this is one of those examples where, you know how that works, sometimes something can go through. And I know, Dean, you were part of the initial group too, coming up with the rules and how it was going to affect our community. And it's been such a positive part of it. Also, that committee, which I'm sure most of you have learned over, but we actually acquired Jerry through that process. Because he was coming here as a consultant for the firm that he worked with before down in Grand Rapids, if I recall, or that area. And so that was a great grab too. He was coming up to help us with this, and lo and behold, we kept him here. So he's been a great addition too. It was nice in this committee because he comes from a background, and of course Nan having her internship, and then having such a involvement with the historic preservation as well. So I know you're not used to public comment on this end, but we just wanted to say thank you for everything you do and how much we appreciate your efforts.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It was nice. We appreciate that.
Thank you.
We're so happy now. Thank you. Gosh, nice to leave on such a nice note. Okay, I think that's everything, unless anyone has anything else. So is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Support?
All in favor? Aye. Thank you.
Thanks, folks.
Thank you, Eric.